그 결과 이들 8개 회사의 영업이익이 2.8배로 늘었다는 게 굉장히
하나 둘 셋. 하나 둘 셋. 네, 백학수 박사님 들리시나요? 하나 둘 셋. 하나 둘 셋. 네, 백학수 박사님 들리시나요? 하나 둘 셋. 하나 둘 셋. 네, 백학수 박사님 들리시나요? 하나 둘 셋. 하나 둘 셋. 네, 그러게 하나, 둘, 셋. 마이크를 테스트합니다. 하나, 둘, 셋. 마이크를 테스트합니다. 하나, 둘, 셋. 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 마이크를 테스트. Can you hear me? 하나, 둘, 셋. 하나, 둘, 셋. Yeah. Okay.
おはようございます。日本語聞こえますでしょうか？入りました。
はい、入りました。この S っていうところ
목소리?
S のところを交代ですると。
そうですね。スンテさんをそっちやってもらって。
노정순 잘 들립니다. 감사합니다.
백학순 박사님 들리십니까?
여보세요?
들립니다.
예,
네,
잘,
박사님 들리시죠?
예, 잘 들립니다.
아, 네, 저희도 들립니다.
예,
김충주 목사님 안녕하세요.
예, 반갑습니다. 먼저.
임필식 목사님 건강하시죠?
예, 잘 있습니다. 반갑습니다.
그리고 더 좋아 보이시네요.
예, 저희 아틀랜타에 있습니다.
백 박사님 안녕하세요.
예, 안녕하십니까.
예, 노 목사님 다들 안녕하시고요. 남 목사님,
목사님.
Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Lee. I just wanted to make sure my mic was working. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Jessica.
Okay.
I can hear you great, Jessica.
Hi. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Hi.
Greetings, good morning, good evening, everyone. This is Kurt Esslinger at the NCCK in Seoul. And just a note to say we'll plan to start right about at 8:30 a.m. our time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.
I cut and 남 목사님 안녕하세요.
언제 한국 오세요?
6월 21일 날 가는데
네.
그 지방에만 있고 서울에 한 일주일 정도 있을 것 같아요.
그럼 전화 주세요.
예, 그럴게요.
Very quickly, if I can, I'd like to check on the pronunciation of names for our facilitators. Bishop Mackenzie, can you confirm, is your name pronounced Bishop Vashti Murphy Mackenzie? Is that how you would like to be introduced?
It is Bishop Vashti. The I is long. Vashti.
Vashti,
Murphy.
Vashti. Okay.
Good morning, good evening, everyone.
Good morning. And then Jennifer, I think you stepped away from your screen perhaps, but we're just trying to make sure if Jennifer's name is pronounced Dibert or Debert. Well, we may simply do by trial and error in that case.
konnichiwa.
高田さん、こんにちは。
남 목사님? 남 목사님? 저기, 예.
예.
저기 그 채트방에 올렸는데 저 프레젠테이션 머티리얼을 공유를 해서 제가 여기서 컨트롤할 수 있도록 그렇게 지금 해 주실 거죠? 아까 그렇게 말씀을 나눴는데.
네, 박사님 원래는 박사님 공유하셔서 이렇게 넘기셔야 되긴 하거든요.
예.
네, 근데 그 방법을 모르시니까
아니요. 예, 이야기하셔요. 예.
네네, 그렇게 하시면 그냥 공유 버튼 누르시면 지금 한번 해보실래요? 공유 버튼
어디
누르시면.
지금 눌러야죠?
네네네. 누르시면 네, 박사님 그 밑에 초록색 버튼 있거든요. 맨 밑에.
예, share screen. 예.
네, 그거 누르시고 네,
예.
됩니다.
네, 알았습니다.
이렇게 해서
제가
하시면 돼서 다시 공유 풀어주시면 공유 여기서 풀까?
예.
좀 이따 공유해 주시면 될 것 같습니다.
예, 됐습니다. 알겠습니다.
백학선 선생님이십니까?
예.
저는 일본 기독교 협의회 총괄사 일을 맡은 김성재 목사입니다. 일본에서 태어난 사람입니다.
김 목사님 반갑습니다.
잘 부탁드립니다. 오늘 일본의 평화운동, 혼복구조 지키는 운동의 우뜸에 서시는 타카다 켄 선생님을 소개해드렸습니다.
예, 네, 고맙습니다.
네.
konnichiwa 타나카상.
타카다 켄 선생.
타카다 켄상.
konnichiwa.
konnichiwa.
It looks like we're still setting up translators, so please bear with us
아,
a
듣고
few
있다면
more minutes.
Jessica, good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you again. I was just reflecting on our connection with Suzanne DiMaggio and your work at the Sejong Institute.
Right. Yeah, you are always, bright.
Oh, thank you. It's 7:30 here, so I'm starting to feel a little bit tired, but it's so nice to see so many friendly faces of people smiling. And usually when you go to these events, half the people don't have their cameras on and they're all looking distracted, but everyone seems so kind of present. So it's very refreshing.
Always, what I meant was you're always bright and smiling. That's what I meant.
I see. Thank you.
I know that, hello, everyone. I know that we have 3 minutes past. We supposed to start it at 8:30. However, we are waiting for the translator and we are expecting more than about 60 attendees today. So right now it's 44. We're gonna wait just a little bit longer. I know this is a very awkward, this long silence and everybody looking at the screen. But however, it's great to see everyone and we will hopefully start soon, very soon. So just let's wait maybe about a few minutes more. Thank you for you being patient with us.
Mimi, you're muted. Mimi, you're muted if you're talking.
Amy, you're mute. Right.
Okay, should we start? Yes, I think I'm gonna, yes. Warm greetings from Seoul, Korea. My name is Mimi Han. Currently, I serve as Vice President of the Worldwide WCA and also the member of the International Affairs Committee in NCCK. Well, welcome everyone to the joint conference of the Envisioning Peace on Korean Peninsula. Today, well, we are expecting about 60 attendees from the Korea, US, Canada, and Japan to discuss widely and deeply about the measures to expand civil and public diplomacy for peace. Especially the major purpose of this conference is to bring together civil society and ecumenical leaders and academic experts to analyze the geopolitical situation of the Northeast Asia and define a strategy and a vision to solidify peace in the Korean Peninsula. Well, since last we met, there has been a lot of unexpected developments. I'm just going to point out just two things very shortly. As you know, the North Korea, in the beginning of May, they officially announced the COVID situation. And May 13th, that's they announced it as 174,000 people, COVID cases. And then within 3 days, it went up to triple, almost 400,000 cases came out. And now it's slowly decreasing. Last report media that I checked was 29th of May. Still 100,000 people, over 100,000 people are having confirmed with the cases. Well, obviously North Korea do not have a proper tool measurement kit to say that it's confirmed cases. They
医
usually
療
say
のキットだとか、これに対処する、
person,
その
feverish person. That's what they say.
素
But
材
anyway,
が十分にないという
still
ことは皆
it's
さん
quite severe for the COVID cases in North Korea. And unfortunately, 2 days ago, you probably heard that North Korea fired short-range ballistic missiles, 8 of them. This is for the first time ever. The 8 times they fired at the same time and same day. Unfortunately, yesterday, South Korea had a Memorial Day holiday, national holiday. And we also fired back 8 of the ground-to-ground missile ATA CMS missiles. 7 was from the South Korea, 1 from US. So it's and unfortunately yesterday, as you know, we have a new elected president from the right-wing party, and you know he doesn't agree with this Moon Jae-in's policy for the Korean peace situation right now, and he just officially made a statement that he will strengthen the military power. He will not tolerate with the North Korea at all, no longer at all. And then he will like to, increase the armament for the national security. So this is right now what's going on right this moment. And you can see how very crucial for this time for the not only Korean Peninsula peace situation, but also it's very crucial to have this conference today. Well, thank you again for giving your precious time and attention, and also the tireless effort and tireless commitment for the peace. We will start this conference with the opening prayer by Jennifer Bert from the American Friends Service Committee. Jennifer?
ここで
The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Jennifer with the American Friends Service Committee, and Thank you all for the opportunity to start this off with a prayer. And I wanted to share a prayer today that's attributed to Christian peacemakers teams. And this is an organization that was formed by Quakers and Mennonites who asked the question, what if we took the same risks for peace as those who are fighting for wars? And they've taken up this radical way of peace building and living into this risky and bold pursuit of peace. And as we talk today, about how to work together for peace on the Korean Peninsula, I draw inspiration and strength from their example. So I will share this prayer with you. All-nourishing God, your children cry for help against the violence of our world, where children starve for bread and feed on weapons, starve for vision and feed on drugs, starve for love and feed on videos, starve for peace and are murdered in our streets. Creator God, timeless preserver of resources, forgive us for the gifts that we have wasted. Renew for us what seems beyond redemption. Call order and beauty to emerge again from chaos. Convert our destructive power into creative service. Help us to heal the woundedness of our world. Liberating God, release us from the demons of violence. Free us today from the disguised demons of deterrence that put guns by our pillows and missiles in our skies. Free us from all demons that blend and blunt our spirits. Cleanse us from all justifications for war and violence. Open our narrowed hearts to suffering. Abiding God, loving renewer of human spirit, unfold our violent fists into peaceful hands. Stretch our sense of family to include our neighbors. Stretch our sense of neighbor to include our enemies, until our response to you finally respects and embraces all creation as precious sacraments of your presence. Hear the prayers of your people. Amen.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing this touching prayer. We will have opening remarks by the NCC USA and then NCCK. First, we will start this opening remarks with NCC USA from the Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie. He serves as an interim president and general secretary for NCC USA. NCCC USA.
Praise the Lord, everyone. I am honored today to give expressions of greetings and gratitude to the Korea U.S. North America Ecumenical Working Group and those of you who are participating in this online conference, Envisioning Peace on the Korean Peninsula, which aims to closely examine the geopolitical situation in the Northeast Asia and gather ecumenical vision and strategy for peace building on the Korean Peninsula. As the President and General Secretary of the National Council of Churches interim, I'm excited to hear the presentation and the responses. Thank you for including me in this event. Today, more than ever, we need to engage in strategic, courageous thinking about peace. That will take courage, not only to think strategically, but then to act strategically in this volatile, uncertain world of ours. But we cannot think or act without courage. And courage fights to show up every day. Sometimes it shows up strong and sometimes it doesn't. In any case, courage is the handmaid of living. We need it in big and small ways, but there is a kind of courage that reaches beyond the present moment to have an impact on generations to come. I call it uncommon courage. It is the kind of courage that calls us to get up again instead of staying down. It calls us to act while others are still in shock. It calls us to move forward when a retreat has been announced. It is the kind of courage that reaches beyond self to impact the lives of others for generations to come. The National Council of Churches has a rich history in advocacy and justice. And now more than ever, we need you to help us to continue to be a strong voice of unity within diversity. NCC has stood in the gap for courageous Christians since 1950. Now we are providing something new through its Friendship Press. We are providing a new edition of sacred text, the New Standard Revised Version Updated Edition Bible. Like its predecessor, the Revised Standard Version in 1946 and the New Revised Standard Version in 1989, it follows a strict protocol for biblical scholarship and translation. This heritage has resulted in the most authoritative version of Scripture available today. The New Revised Standard Edition, Updated Edition is now available on Kindle, and our publishers will be providing this rich text in the months ahead. I look forward to an informative online conference with you. Now may the peace of the Lord be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this inspiring opening address. Next, opening remarks by NCCK, Reverend Lee Hong-jung. He serves right now as a General Secretary of NCCK. 이영정 목사님.
Thank you very much for giving me some more time to make my own remark. In the face of the life security crisis caused by the COVID-19 outbreak, Ukrainian war, the US-China hegemonic conflict, the ROK-US joint military drills, and North Korea's missile tests in this neo-Cold War order, which are leading us into the crisis of hostile relations. We are holding a four-way talk among Korea, Japan, the US, and Canada. Through this talk, we would like to analyze the signs of an ever-changing geopolitical economic situation and seek a new direction for the ecumenical movement engaged in the Korean peace process. Eloquently demonstrating the practical evils caused by war and state violence, the Korean War, the first hot war of the Cold War era, became a symbol of anti-peace, giving rise to the horrors of killing life, the trauma, entrenchment, vision, and the spread of a Cold War culture. As the Korean War continues under a state of armistice, the social psychology of division and the Cold War are internalized. Mutual distrust and hostility became an iron curtain. Imagination for peace has retrograded. The Korean War has become a crucial obstacle on the way to the future of peace. The US-Japan alliance system called San Francisco regime and the Korea-US alliance system called Panmunjom regime had been conceived during and after the Korean War. The San Francisco regime has been a passive peace system that institutes various forms of Cold War, driving the Korean Peninsula into the quagmire of the world military industrial complex. Today's neo-Cold War hegemonic structure within the Indo-Pacific strategy demonstrates the geopolitical fate of the Korean Peninsula, which is still caught in the alliance trap formed during the Cold War. The ROK-US alliance has played as a double-edged sword and become a structural root cause of entrenching the division of Korean Peninsula and the neo-Cold War order in Northeast Asia. The two Koreas' independent and intersubjective peace cooperation, an end-of-war declaration, and the transition from armistice agreement to a peace agreement, which should take precedence according to the Panmunjom Declaration, are still tied to the conditions of denuclearization and accompanying sanctions on DPRK. As long as the US uses the existing multi-layered sanctions against the DPRK and ROK-US joint military exercises as a means of practical diplomacy, it will be difficult to resume independent and reciprocal peace cooperation between the two Koreas. A neo-Cold War hegemonic structure in Northeast Asia clearly shows the fate of the Korean Peninsula held hostage in an alliance trap. The Cold system, along with the Indo-Pacific economic framework, will evolve and develop as the ROK-US-Japan trilateral alliance is strengthened amid the struggle for hegemony between the US and China. But the impact of this multilateral inclusive alliance and partnership on the Korean peace process is very negative. In the name of the ROK-US alliance, the ROK will be summoned to war for alliance diplomacy or the alliance itself in service of US interest at any time. Under the Cold system, the sharing of defense costs for the US troops in Korea will increase, and state-of-the-art strategic weapons will be strategically deployed on the Korean Peninsula. The advanced ROK-US joint military exercise will continue to be strengthened, and the ROK will be pushed to the fore of the deterrence front against China. The Korean peace process will be bogged down, and it will even be difficult to take the most basic steps, such as declaring an end to the war and signing a peace agreement. What we need is not the San Francisco Panmunjom regime based on the ROK-US and the Japan-US alliance systems and Cold system, but a Northeast Asian common peace security system for building a Northeast Asian common house. The people of the Korean Peninsula want peace, not war, and we know of no other way to go than by peaceful means. A complete denuclearization of the DPRK is not the ultimate goal, but a process for peace. Peace must come before denuclearization. Instead of denuclearization, we need substantial progress for peace in which mutual non-aggression and regime stability are guaranteed through independent and intersubjective peace cooperation between the two Koreas. In order to protect the people's right to life security on the Korean Peninsula, all military actions and hostile policies that encourages confrontation and conflict on and around the Korean Peninsula must be stopped immediately. Armed with the strongest military capabilities and state-of-the-art military equipment, and maintaining plans for a war scenario of preemptive attack on and occupation of the DPRK, one cannot build mutual trust in building peace on the Korean Peninsula. The sanctions against North Korea should be lifted. The sanctions against the DPRK threaten the people's right to security by using the structured poverty system of the DPRK as a tool, and as they are anti-peace acts that seek the collapse of the DPRK regime, they are regarded as strategically structured violation of people's universal human rights and humanitarian principles. In the end, inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation will be carried out comprehensively based on the lifting of sanctions and the reassumption of humanitarian aid, so the expansion of universal human rights that guarantees the lives of the North Koreans should take precedence. And this should lead to an end of war declaration, the signing of a peace agreement, and the establishment of diplomatic ties between the US and DPRK, which guarantees the stability of DPRK regime, and so that a de facto reality of the denuclearization may be created. The key to opening the rusty iron gate of the division and the Cold War at 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics was the temporary suspension of the ROK-US joint military drills. In order to make a new way out of stalled peace process after the summit, the ROK, DPRK, and US government must express their true commitment to lead the peace process through peaceful means. Using the crisis of COVID-19 in North Korea, the ROK-US can establish a temporary COVID-19 peace regime so that the Korean peace process can find out another exit to move forward. By participating in the Korean Peace Appeal campaign to build peace on the Korean Peninsula, we Christians should correct the anti-peaceful and regressive Korean peace process and achieve a healed, reconciled, peaceful coexistence on the Korean Peninsula. We should never let the logics of economics of war led by the globalized military-industrial complex control the Korean peace process. Peace does not come from muzzle of guns and is not made by president and their generals. The main subject of peace building are the people who live on the democratic values such as sovereignty resting with people. We may develop a civilian alliance of peace diplomacy that can analyze anti-peace realities, advocate for police change, and lobby for peace. Through a joint positive peace education and a collective healing and reconciliation process, we must transform our stratified geology of mind occupied by hostile Cold War ideologies into a geology of mind based on forgiveness and reconciliation. Through this, we can create a culture of reconciliation peace and promote the people's peace capital to overcome the limitation of the current geopolitical realism in neo-Cold War order. What is important now is the consciousness of a peace sovereignty of the peace-loving people of Korea, Japan, the US, and Canada, and their will for building a Northeast Asian common house. For this, let us establish a peace alliance in solidarity with love and justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your heartful opening remarks. Now we're going to go with the highlight of the first session, keynote speaker from the Dr. Hak-Sun Baek. He serves as a president of the Academy of Kim Dae-jung Studies. Well, extend a warm welcome to Dr. Baek.
Thank you, Mimi Yan. Shalom, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Thank you very much, organizers, for your invitation so that I can share some of my thoughts on envisioning peace on the Korean Peninsula on this very special occasion of four-nation ecumenical group conference. Let me have some control of my presentation material so that I can go more effectively and efficiently. My presentation consists of 4 parts. The world at a crossroads, U.S. global strategy and its impact on the Korean Peninsula, and the path to peace in Korea jump-started in 2018, but stalled 2019. Inter-Korean relations and the U.S. DPRK relations, what is at stake, what it looks like, and prospects for peace on the Korean Peninsula, key questions, key factors. Major man-made disasters, threats, global warming and climate change, public health crisis, COVID-19, and air and water pollution, marine plastic waste, disrupted by air technology, return of geopolitics, and threat of nuclear war, all are self-evident to us. The problem is that the shaping of a neo-Cold War era in international politics and the collapse of international cooperative governance order, United States versus China. For instance, when there was an outbreak of a COVID-19, the big powers like the United States and China were supposed to establish cooperative leadership in dealing with this new pandemic, but that did not happen. They thought of everything from the perspective of traditional, conventional Cold War, conventional geopolitics and geostrategy. Problems of big powers. Currently, we see the U.S. domestic political system at risk. January 6th riot and the Xi Jinping strengthening of monolithic power in China and Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. What is U.S. global strategy? The United States wants to decouple Russia and China from each other more than anything else and focus more on China, leaving Russia basically in the hands of the Europeans. This is the key point with which we can understand U.S. global strategy. Although there are urgent and immediate tasks ahead of us in Ukraine that are unavoidable and must be met by transatlantic unity, meaning NATO alliance, but at the same time, we must recognize that the larger, more fundamental challenges for 21st century really lay in the Indo-Pacific region. This was said by Kurt Campbell, coordinator of Indo-Pacific Affairs of the United States. Just before Biden visited Korea and Japan this past month. So the United States sought to weaken, contain, and isolate Russia all along since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. As of 2022, NATO has increased its membership from 12 original member states to 30 states. Now with Sweden and Finland applying for NATO membership also. Interestingly and quite understandably, the NATO member states did and will decide to increase their defense spending rather dramatically. You know what Germany did and other countries did. And so this means that the United States is basically in a better position to contain Russia's threat in Europe by spending its resources much less than before, Europeans being much more responsible resource-wise. In other words, the US has a prospect for stabilizing the European front against Russia, stabilizing the European front against Russia much more efficiently and effectively by now, being able to be more focused on China, which is the larger, more fundamental challenge for the 21st century. What is US strategy to China? We all know rebalance to Asia, Indo-Pacific strategy in the Quad and IPEF. And but the linchpin of the United States strategic offensive versus China has been the trilateral US, Japan, South Korea alliance cooperation and the strengthening of it. More broadly, the United States wanted to connect Europe to Asia also. China in response, proposed such Chinese Dream and the Belt and Road Initiative, AIIB, and Regional Conference for Economic Partnership, RECEP, etc. The problem we see by now is that the rivalry and the strategic competition between the United States and China has developed into wars of technology, value, ideology, and the political system, as well as geopolitical and geoeconomic one, ushering in a neo-Cold War era. There might be some other opinions, different opinions, but that's the way I see it now. In a nutshell, US global strategy is a divide and rule, separating Russia and China and containing and defeating them one by one. Very smart and strategically, economically more effective and efficient, I guess. The US strategy to Russia and China are almost identical in terms of mobilizing NATO members and Japan's and South Korea's and the Quad members' resources, both military and economic, to the maximum, so that the United States could be in almost a perfect position to spend less and gain more, including arms sales. And then what are the policy implications for the Korean Peninsula? At least four policy implications. First, the United States may demand more military and economic contributions from Japan and Korea, pressuring both East Asian allies to increase defense expenditures and purchasing US arms and equipment more. Second, inter-Korean reconciliation cooperation, let alone the end of Korean War and peace settlement on the Korean Peninsula, may be more difficult, the United States practically being not enthusiastic about them anymore. Third, South Korea's independent North Korea policy may not be possible. Please note the changes below in US ROC leaders' joint statement last year and this year's. First, last year's joint statement. We also reconfirm our common belief that diplomacy and dialogue based on previous inner Korean and US DPR commitments such as the 2018 Panmunjom Declaration and Singapore Joint Statement, are essential to achieve the complete denuclearization and establishment of permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. President Biden also expressed his support for inter-Korean dialogue, engagement, and cooperation. But please note that the above is missing this year's South Korea-US joint statement, summit joint statement. Compare the following also. President Biden reaffirms the US commitment to provide extended deterrence using its full range capabilities. That's last year's, and this year's, they including a full range of US defense capabilities, including nuclear, conventional, and missile defense capabilities. Also, they decided to reactivate high-level extended deterrence strategy and consultation group at the earliest possible date. So you see the difference, a clear difference between last year's joint statement and this year's. The fourth implication may be the US tend to deal with the North Korean nuclear and ICBM threats in the context of its policy. This is a real problem for Koreans, in particular. This may add fuel to the fire when many people subscribe, not only Koreans, but also people around the world, subscribe to the conspiracy theory that US has not had a true intention and will. And so they did not make such effort to resolve the Korean problem with North Korea, but had rather exploited the crisis in Korea for the military, economic, and political gains for the US versus China. But as we all recall, there was a path of peace in Korea, jump-started in 2018, but stalled in 2019. There was a nuclear war threat in 2017. North Korea, as we all know, has ICBM's hydrogen bomb, and North Korea declared a completion of national nuclear force. And the United States response was strike scenarios, including the Black Nose, in which United States thought about using 50 to 60 nuclear bombs against North Korea, just in case. The North Korea, and also on the first day and second day of 2018, the leaders of North Korea and the United States talked about nuclear buttons on their office desks. They dealt with nuclear weapons just like toys during the period of, egregiously heightened threat of war, not a simple threat of war, but nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula. So Koreans and other people around the world thought, I guess, enough is enough, never again. We have to deal with the root cause of the Korean problem once and for all. But there was a turnaround to peace in 2018. Kim Jong-un's New Year's address and the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. This may not have been revealed to just public, but the general public. But during Pyeongchang Olympic Games, there was a series of meetings of senior level intelligence officers of two Koreas and US for inter-Korean US DPRK summit talks. So the outcome was Panmunjom Declaration and also a Singapore joint statement. The historic US DPRK summit in Singapore and the joint statement could be described as it's a divide between before Singapore and after Singapore in terms of US policy tools. What do we mean by policy tools here? Until Singapore, just as we see in the Black Nose, attack plan, the United States thought of applying military means to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis, meaning deal with the nuclear-tipped ICBM threat to the U.S. continent. But the United States eventually decided to use non-military means, diplomacy, in other words, to deal with the threat. So after Singapore, for instance, if you hear the statements of Department of Defense of the United States or Defense Minister, they never say they will apply military means, but simply they say they will support State Department's effort to resolve the Korean crisis, and that kind of statements coming from DoD. This is a very interesting change. But very unfortunately, just after Singapore, the United States establishments in the military and diplomacy realms launched a campaign to reverse the course, and they succeeded in doing so in Hanoi in February 2019. A very treacherous period in the negotiation for the Korean peace settlement and denuclearization. In Hanoi, the United States prepared a walkway option as the dominant scenario for the Hanoi summit. They also thought of big deal and small deal, but they preferred walkaway option. And if you have a chance to read John Bolton's The Room Where It Happened, and also Bob Woodward's Rage, all details of this walkway option are described. Trump's preoccupation with the theatrics for favorite media coverage, particularly during time when there is congressional hearings where his private lawyer testified that Trump was a racist. He made a lot of investments and a lot of corruptions. Kim Jong-un's disillusionment with the US and South Korea after Singapore, and this is a serious problem, which had a tremendous meaning for the negotiations and also dialogue we tried to pursue after Singapore. So we can talk about another divide between before Hanoi and after Hanoi in the history of US DPRK negotiation, not only in the history of US DPRK negotiation, but also in the history of inter-Korean negotiation again, because DPRK, US DPRK negotiation failure had a serious impact on inter-Korean negotiation as well. Kim Jong-un revealed his disillusionment at the Supreme People's Congress in April, just after Singapore, and also, but there was a very brief Trump-Kim meeting in Panmunjom on June 30th. You may recall the meeting over there. Basically, theatrical move on the part of Donald Trump for domestic and international consumption. It was about 15-minute long, very short meeting, but Kim Jong-un spent most of the time on the demand to stop US-South Korea joint military drill. And Kim Jong-un sent a letter to Trump on August 5th, 2019, which was the longest letter among about 28 letters sent to Trump. And not to Trump, but the exchange between the two leaders. In that letter, Kim Jong-un was very expressed his disappointment, saying that United States, he expects United States not to resume joint military drill because he particularly emphasized the importance of the stopping that military drill on June 30th meeting. So as long as the United States does not come up with a face-saving, as also in the eyes of the whole world, face-saving measures and other responsible measures taken by the United States for the negotiation. What's the use of having a working level negotiation? That kind of message over there. He and we all know in Stockholm, October that year, there was a working level meeting, but it failed. Now, in Korean-US diplomatic relations, time is very limited, so let me try to be brief as much as possible. Let me deal with North Korea's strategy of survival and development for 21st century since 1991. In 1991, December that year, we all know Soviet Union collapsed. And this strategy might not be, well known to you, but because this is the key part of my presentation, sort of in trying to understand North Korea's strategy until Hanoi failure. But if we do take appropriate measures in the longer term, we can restore the kind of strategy of survival and development for the 21st century on part of North Korea, so that we can begin negotiation again. The strategy design, North Korea's balancing strategy toward China and US to secure independent space in East diplomacy. They wanted to bring United States in to counter the dramatically growing China's influence on North Korea in the absence of Soviet Union. So North Korea's offered a give and take deal to the United States in 1992 in New York, January in New York, for instance, 1992. What is the give and take deal? North Korea wanted to take such things like the end of the Korean War, signing a peace treaty, normalized relationship, and get economic cooperation. What is to give? Not to develop nuclear weapons and to informally tolerate the continued stationing of US forces in South as long as it remains not as an anti-North Korea forces, informally tolerated. And there were 6 rounds of attempt to carry out the strategy. What's the use of establishing a strategy unless it is implemented? So they tried 6 rounds of attempt. In 1992, there was a historic North Korea US DPRK meeting in New York, and in 1993, 1994, you can recall the first North Korean nuclear crisis and also agreed framework in Geneva. And 2000, Albright, Madeleine Albright's visit to North Korea, and they wanted to re-establish a completely new relationship between the two countries. And in response to Marshal Jo Myung-nok's visit to White House. And 2005, second North Korean nuclear crisis, and also we can recall September 19th joint statement out of 6-party deal. And 2013, this is not known much to the public, but for the first time publicly, the United States decided to have a nuclear war threat during the military drill, South Korea, US military drill to North Korea. So North Korea responded by taking 8-9 countermeasures, having another, extremely heightened threat of war, not a simple threat of war, threat of a nuclear war at that time. As I mentioned at the outset, there was a nuclear war threat in the second half of 2017. That was the second round, so-called the second round, a threat of a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula. The first one was 2013. 2018, 2019, I've explained already, Panmunjom Declaration, the Singapore Joint Statement, all those agreements. And what is Biden's North Korea policy? As I understand it, it changed from status quo non-action policy to confrontation and punishment. Biden's calibrated practical approach to North Korea, that simply means status quo non-action policy toward North Korea, as long as North Korea does not provoke, unless North Korea provoked. And there is a March 24th, ICBM test firing, and Hwasong 17 this time covering the whole U.S. continent, and lifting is self-imposed moratorium of ICBM test for the past 4 years. As Mimi Han pointed out the day before yesterday, there was 8 test firings of short range missiles, mixing all kinds of types from all over the United States, over of North Korea. And recently, as all witnessed, Biden responded to North Korea's provocation by stepping confrontation and punishment North Korea. And but the problem of Biden's policy change is this: it is taking place when North Korea is forcefully consolidating its nuclear and ICBM, SLBM capabilities like never before. And as Mimi Han pointed out the day before yesterday, South Korea and the United States responded to North Korea's test firing of 8 missiles by launching 8 missiles, the same number, but it does not mean that it can effectively deter North Korea's nuclear or ballistic missile threats. Now, COVID-19 pandemic outbreak in North Korea. Now, let me close by coming up with key questions, 10, 11 questions, so that we can contemplate on how to get out of this crisis and this non-action period to dialogue and negotiation. How to forge and exercise a cooperative leadership among the countries involved in the Korean affairs to resolve the Korean problem. Will peaceful coexistence be possible between the two Koreas and between the United States and North Korea? We have to decide all of them. Is the denuclearization of North Korea really a top priority for the US? Can the US put an end to the anti-North Korea policies such as US-ROC joint military economic sanctions, etc., which North Korea has consistently demanded as a quid pro quo for denuclearizing itself? Will North Korea denuclearize itself through negotiation? How to have the establishment of peace regime and the denuclearization of the whole Korean peninsula to be pursued and achieved in parallel? Not in sequence, but in parallel. That's what I mean. How to make North Korea's South Korea policy independent of its US policy. As long as North Korea's negotiation with the United States fails, North Korea automatically stops dialogue and negotiation with South Korea as well. This is a huge problem for Korean peacemaking. How to peacekeeping and peacemaking. How to manage the conflict between South Korea's pursuit of independence from the US and its need to strengthen alliance cooperation with the US in dealing with the North and also in resolving the Korean problem. how to deal with the problems derived from the asymmetry of US-Korea alliance and improve problem-solving quality of the alliance. In what type of command system and when and how early can the wartime operational control of the South Korean army be transferred to Korea? Let me have a few words about this. As you all recall, in 2018, South Korea and North Korea were key actors in initiating the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. But after Singapore, South Korea was sidelined by both the United States and North Korea. And South Korea, if you recall the famous photo taken at the June 30th, 2019 Panmunjom, very brief Panmunjom summit meeting. Moon Jae-in appeared there, but he did not go into the negotiation dialogue room at Panmunjom. And if South Korea had had its wartime operation control of its own army, South Korea would not have been sidelined or excluded from the negotiation for the Korean peace settlement. The key question of Korean peace settlement, both the United States, South Korea, and North Korea are pursuing is even though there are a lot of talks and problems with economy related sanctions and economic cooperation, but what is key element is war and peace issue. So as long as South Korea does not possess its own APCON, operational control, wartime operational control of its army, South Korea will continue to be excluded, which is a very sad thing. And how to deal with the tension between the establishment of peace regime on the Korean Peninsula, in a Korean peaceful coexistence, and the effort to achieve peace unification of the Korean Peninsula. How to revive the path of peace on the Korean Peninsula amidst ever-intensifying confrontation between the United States and China down the road toward new war. Finally, how to bring the United States and North Korea back to negotiation table. And in the first place, despite ever-deepened mutual disillusionment and distrust since the Hanoi failure. Thank you very much. And let me finish by, as a way of introduction to and also advertisement of the Academy of Kim Dae-jung Studies and affiliated Kim Dae-jung School of Politics. The Kim Dae-jung Foundation decided to establish a research and education institutions. So they established the Academy of Kim Dae-jung Studies and affiliated Kim Dae-jung School of Politics. I was honored to name the founding president of the Academy and former House Speaker of Korean National Assembly, Moon Hee-sang, named principal of the School of Politics. And so let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Beck, for such a detailed, great, not only presentation, but overview of the geopolitical situation in Korea. And also it really helped us to see the bigger picture and holistic way of looking at it, situation and projecting the future state of the, give us guidance, maybe a little tips for the future state of the peace in the Korean Peninsula. Thank you so much for your time. We will have two responses for the your keynote speech. One from the US, from Dr. Jessica J. Lee, and the second from Japan, Mr. Takata Ken-sang. So we will start with the US, Dr. Jessica Lee, from the fellow of the Quincy Institute. You will have about 10 to 15 minutes. I would kindly ask you to keep within time, and so that we can have more time in the Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Mimi and Jennifer, for inviting me. and Dr. Beck, who I've known for as long as I've been at the Quincy Institute, which has already been 2.5 years. Of course, I met you when you were at Sejong Institute, and it's an honor to be part of this discussion with you tonight. As Mimi noted, I'm a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank. We're actually more of an action tank, which means that we not only produce original research and analysis, we also actively seek to build coalitions and work with civil society to affect our ideas into policy change. Our goal is to pursue a more restrained U.S. foreign policy that encourages multilateral solutions and a smaller U.S. military footprint abroad. We are named after then Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, who famously warned in 1821 that America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. Adams was not concerned that America was not strong enough, but that unnecessary involvement in foreign wars would put at risk everything that the nation stood for. Ill-advised foreign wars, Adams argued, posed a threat to liberty itself. 200 years later, as the US-China strategic competition heats up, as Dr. Peck already noted, and threatens to pull the two largest economies into conflict, John Quincy Adams' warning rings true, and I think is as important today as it was back in 1821. Secretary Adams was not an isolationist, and neither is the Quincy Institute. We oppose wars of choice that put the lives of our troops and American people needlessly at risk. We favor a military establishment that is sized and organized to protect our country's vital national interests. And we believe that the United States must adhere to a principle of restraint, using force sparingly and only as a last resort. Energetic and creative diplomacy must become the measure of American statecraft, rather than frequency of airstrikes, number of US bases abroad, or the size of the Pentagon budget. I'd like to make 3 points about Dr. Peck's very insightful and detailed presentation. First, I share his concern that a neo-Cold War between US and China threatens the Korean peace process by distracting Washington from the work of sustained, well-resourced, and high-level diplomacy that we need in order to make progress on the North Korea issue. In Washington, we see the world primarily through the lens of great power competition between US and China. It is sometimes cast as a value-based and threat-laden struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, represented by the two countries. This good versus evil binary framing is being driven further by the Russia-Ukraine war, which some argue is drawing Russia and China closer together than ever before due to their shared concerns about the United States and the West. The zero-sum, I win, you lose mentality focused on competition, pressure, punishment, confrontation, and maybe even decoupling with China dominate conversations in Washington as well as in Beijing. In the meantime, discussions about various types of understanding, mutual accommodation, collaboration have become marginalized and characterized as too naive or unrealistic. Unfortunately, this in turn could make the possibility of peacefully ending the Korean War through a peace treaty signed by the United States on behalf of the UN Command, North and South Korea and China, all but a distant dream. It could also stymie inter-Korean reconciliation, as Dr. Peck suggested. My second point is, given all of this, what can be done? If it is in fact the case that Sino-US rivalry is dominating US foreign policy strategy in Asia, and Washington is using China as a justification for its ever-growing military budget, even in the time of a pandemic, Where then is the space for progress? Sung Kim, Ambassador Sung Kim, has famously said repeatedly, US will meet North Korea anywhere, anytime. But how can you possibly talk to an adversary when doing so could be seen as weakness or even dangerous? I think part of the solution lies in drawing attention to the unsustainable nature of the status quo. Today, or yesterday rather, as South Koreans commemorated the 67th anniversary of Memorial Day, there were 8 ballistic missile launches by the United States and South Korean militaries, as Mimi noted, in response to 8 ballistic missile launches by North Korea on Sunday. Standing before the Seoul National Cemetery, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol vowed to respond firmly and strictly to any provocations from North Korea. Yoon described North Korea's nuclear weapons and missiles not only as a threat to the Korean Peninsula, but also as a threat to Northeast Asia and the whole world. Whether such strong words and military responses to North Korea's missile tests will deter it or simply provoke it remains an open question and a test for the Yoon government, now in its 3rd month. What is certain is that tensions will grow on the Korean Peninsula at a time when the US appears distracted by the brutal and illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, as well as countering the supposedly existential threat posed by China. To President Biden's credit, its officials have sought to de-link the goals of denuclearization from urgent issues such as the COVID crisis in North Korea. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs, Daniel Crittenbrink, earlier today spoke at an event co-hosted by Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Korea Foundation in Washington, saying that the United States continues to support efforts to provide humanitarian assistance and COVID-19 vaccines to the DPRK. We see this humanitarian crisis as separate from making progress on denuclearization, and we do not and will not link the two. The problem, in my view, is that action speaks louder than words. And unless diplomatic efforts are given adequate space and clarification, really, because we don't actually know what US means by talking anywhere, anytime, and under whose parameters will that be decided. There's so little that we know about the US's actual diplomatic strategy. And the risk here, of course, is not only lack of clarity, but that because actions speak louder than words, these words, however pretty they might be, will simply be drowned out by military shows of force and threat of force, the latter of which plays directly into North Korean government's narrative that it is under threat and in need of nuclear weapons to survive. This leads me to my final point about Dr. Peck's remarks. I think the question he asked about how to establish a peace regime and achieve denuclearization of the peninsula is absolutely critical. In fact, I spent about 9 months up to February of this year exploring this question as part of a virtual peace game exercise and a paper that I wrote with a colleague, Frank Aum, at US Institute of Peace. And throughout this process, I think that it was very clear to us that the two things have to come together. You can't demand denuclearization without addressing the fundamental sources of North Korea's insecurity and the volatile state of the peninsula. I think it's also the case that in general, the Biden administration seems sincere in wanting progress in both peace building and denuclearization. I think it just doesn't want to spend much political capital and fight for it to get there and to achieve it, particularly with Congress. Civil society, which is all of us, should find a way to capture the public's attention on how the status quo is dangerous, costly, and simply kicks the can down the road on the fundamental reasons for the dysfunction on the peninsula, which is seen in the endless Korean War. I will conclude by saying my job out of graduate school was actually as a congressional staff member in the House of Representatives. I was there for 6 years as a foreign policy advisor. I also worked for 4 years as a community organizer with Korean Americans, and led our community's response to President Trump's call for a preemptive war, or some discussion about a bloody nose strike, or fire and fury threat, as you all remember. And I just bring this up because in both of those roles, I saw firsthand, very closely and upfront, the power of constituent engagements and grassroots movements in changing national policies and public's attitudes. I think religious groups like yours that are like my think tank, transpartisan or maybe bipartisan, nonpartisan, but you don't have a single partisan orientation, you also have sort of a unique vantage point in that you're able to talk to various people across the aisle rather than just stick to one political party or one set of elected representatives. So in some ways, we could play a unifying role if we had a common agenda that we pursue together. And I think, through those efforts, perhaps we can find a more humane and less militarized way forward on the Korean Peninsula. I will stop there and really look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. For what you said with the overpromise and underdeliver, yet, however, see how important the role of a civil society really had to come together for the peace. And thank you for your inspiring response. I will, because due to time, I will just straight and introduce next response from the Japan, Mr. Tadaka Ken. He serves right now, General Secretary of the Civil Association for the Article 9 of Japanese Peace Constitutions. Well, thank you, and the floor is yours.
はい、皆さんおはようございます。今ご紹介いただきましたように、この団体は2014年から15年にかけての日本での新しい安保法制に反対する全国的な市民の戦いの中で生まれた共同組織です。そこの共同代表をやっております。今いろいろお話をお聞きしました。ダブルことも出てくると思いますけれども、バイデン大統領が5月の20日から24日まで韓国と日本を訪れ、両国で首脳会談を行い、その後、クアッド、日本、アメリカ、オーストラリア、インドの首脳会談を開きました。バイデン大統領はこの歴訪の中で、中国等を排除した新たな経済組織 IPEF インド太平洋経済枠組みを強引に発足させました。バイデンの歴訪では朝鮮の非核化、朝鮮半島ではありません。朝鮮の非核化のための米日韓の協力と米韓合同軍事演習の規模拡大を確認しました。これを日米首脳会談では、岸田首相は防衛力、軍事力の抜本的な強化のため、防衛費の相当な増額をバイデン大統領に約束をしました。日本の国会でまだ全く議論していないうちに、アメリカ大統領に約束したわけです。そして、前の首相であった安倍晋三元首相は、今から計算すると、当初予算が今年は 5.4 兆円だったわけですから、来年は6兆円台後半から7兆円が見えるまでの規模の増額をする。そういう軍事力の強化をするというような発言をしています。バイデン大統領は後にホワイトハウスが路線変更はないと打ち消したものの、従来の 戦略的曖昧さを踏み越えて、台湾有事に軍事介入する姿勢を示しました。これは中国に対するあからさまな挑発であって、中国包囲網の強化であり、軍事緊張を拡大するものです。これは岸田内閣による日本の大軍拡の表明であり、従来日本政府が取ってきた日米安保体制下の専守防衛戦略を突破し、対中国、朝鮮、ロシアを念頭に置いた軍事大国化、従属帝国主義化を目指すものだと思います。ちなみに昨日、日本の首相官邸前は雨が降ってたんですけれども、4回目の日本の大軍拡に反対する市民の行動というのを首相官邸前で市民やりました。4月21日に自民党政務調査会の安保調査会が公表した新たな国家安全保障戦略等の実現に向けた提言という、これが発表されたんですけれども、これはウクライナの事態がインド太平洋地域、とりわけ東アジアにおいても例外ではないということを強調し、将来ヨーロッパで見られている事態が東アジアに発生しないとは言えないという危機感を煽り立て、これを前提に防衛費増額など異常な軍拡に進んでいくことを正当化しています。岸田政権はこの提言を下敷きにして年内にも今年中にも国家安全保障戦略、国家防衛戦略、防衛力整備計画、いわゆる防衛三文書というんですけれども、従来からもあるんですが、これを大改定する構えでおります。これによって従来からの日本の安全保障政策は大きく転換していくのは必然だと思います。ご承知のように1976年に三木武夫内閣というのがあったんですが、これは防衛費、軍事費は日本の GDP 比 1% 枠を超えないということを閣議決定しました。以来、日本はそれから数十年にわたって多少の上下はありましたけれども、一時期それを超えるようなこともありましたけれども、全体として日本の防衛費は対 GDP 1% 以内ということを維持してきました。これは歴代内閣が専守防衛政策を打ち出してきたことと不可分で一体のもので、専守防衛は日本国憲法9条との関連で合憲と解釈されて、憲法違反ではないと解釈されて、日本の防衛戦略の基本的姿勢とされてきました。私は専守防衛そのものに異論はあるんですけれども、今回はそれは置いておきます。専守防衛は相手から武力攻撃を受けたときに初めて軍事力を行使し、その行使は自衛のための必要最小限度のものであって、保持する防衛力、軍事力も自衛のための必要最低限のものだとされてきました。今、岸田内閣の下で、この国是とも言うべき専守防衛政策、対 GNP 比 1% 以内という路線が海外で戦争のできる国に向かって大きく転換されようとしています。岸田首相は今年年頭の施政方針演説で、いわゆる敵基地攻撃能力を含め、あらゆる選択肢を排除せず現実的に検討すると述べました。あらゆる選択肢を排除しないと言明したことで、従来の政府与党が取ってきた安保防衛政策に対する縛りが解けました。そこが抜けました。この岸田首相が示した指針に沿って自民党安保調査会は今回の提言を取りまとめたわけです。提言は 従来使用してきた敵基地攻撃能力の呼称を反撃能力という言葉に言い換え、その能力を保有することを政府に求める内容です。攻撃対象は相手国のミサイル基地だけではなく、従来はそう言ってきたんですけれども、相手国のミサイル基地を攻撃するだけではなく、指揮機能に関連する機能も含めるというふうにしてきました。ですから、これは日本で言えば防衛省とか、あるいは首相官邸とか、そういうところも含めて攻撃するというふうに言ってきました。防衛費については、従来の、額の倍増になる国内総生産比 2% 以上ということを5年以内に達成するということを盛り込みました。そして軍事技術を向上させるために中国や朝鮮の軍事動向を踏まえて迎撃のみでは我が国を防衛しきれない恐れがある。迎え撃つということだけではなくて相手国が車両や列車や、潜水艦などから発射能力を持っていることなどを考えると、ミサイル発射方式の多様化も見据えて、基地に限定する必要はない。攻撃対象は基地に限定する必要はない。向こうの中枢を攻撃することも含めるべきだという意見を反映して、攻撃対象、反撃対象は基地に限定されなくて相手の指揮統制能力機構等も含むと明記したわけです。従来日本政府が取ってきた基本政策である専守防衛は相手から武力攻撃を受けた場合にそれに反撃するということでしたけれども、そしてそれは必要最小限の行使ということでしたけれども、装備も必要最小限のものに限っていたわけですけれども、安倍首相も2018年当時、これは防衛戦略としては大変必要最小限のものに限っていたが、大変難しい。ミサイル攻撃の第一弾は感受しなければならないが、この考え方は憲法の精神にのっとったものだというふうに発言をしていました。しかし今回の反撃能力という言葉はそうではなくて、敵の第一撃を感受することに限定はしていません。相手側の攻撃が明確に意図があって、すでに着手している状態であれば、敵基地攻撃の戦略、判断を政府が行うというふうにして発射、攻撃を容認しています。相手側の武力攻撃の内容も弾道ミサイル攻撃を含む我が国への武力攻撃というふうにしてサイバーやあるいは電磁波などへの対処も盛り込んでいます。自民党は日本の政権党である自民党は昨年の総選挙の中で NATO 諸国が米国の要求する国防予算の目標を GDP 比 2% 以上としていることに倣って日本の防衛費も GDP 比 2% 以上することを主張しました。昨年の総選挙で初めて公然と主張したわけです。防衛費対 GDP 比 2% 以上に目標を変更することは安倍政権からの9年の防衛費が年々変化してきたとはいえ、増大してきたとはいえ、対 GNP 比 1% 以内に抑えてきたものを大幅に突破するものです。ちなみに、NATO は防衛費の計算に恩給費とか PKO 維持費なども含めているので、21年度の日本の防衛予算はそれに倣って計算すれば 1.24% になるという報告もあります。いずれにしても提言は 軍事費について NATO が目標としている GDP 比 2% 以上に足並みを揃えようとしています。今年の防衛予算は 5.4 兆円ですから、5年以内に11兆円以上の規模とする大軍拡を企画していることになります。21年度防衛予算を 2% で計算すると、日本は米国、中国に続く世界第3位の軍事費大国になります。軍事的な実力の計算はいろいろあろうと思いますが、軍事費で計算すれば、米国、中国に続く世界第3位の軍事費大国になるということになります。憲法9条がある国で、このようなことが許されていいはずがありません。だからこそ、自民党は、今度の7月にある参議院選以降、国政選挙がしばらくない3年間、これを黄金の3年間などと呼んでいるわけですけれども、この期間に改憲、憲法を変える発議と国民投票をやって、これら全体の憲法を突破した事態を憲法で追認していくという道を進もうとしています。今回の自民党の安保調査会で議論されたものは、ロシアのウクライナ侵略戦争や台湾有事は日本有事などというとんでもない議論を口実にして、従来の日本政府の専守防衛を大きく転換することになります。安倍首相などは敵基地攻撃の能力の保有とともに核の共有、核シェアリングというようなことを叫び始めました。軍事基地攻撃能力の保有論は、相手国の弾道ミサイルの発射拠点を攻撃する能力のことで、従来はミサイルの早期迎撃に主眼を置いたものでした。しかし、安倍首相は自分は打撃力と言ってきましたけれども、目標を基地に限定する必要はないというようなことを最近しきりに言っています。そしてこれは、防衛の名のもとにウクライナの首都キーウまで攻撃したロシアのウクライナ侵攻と同じで、世界を揺るがしているロシアのウクライナ侵略という惨事に便乗したショックドクトリンだと思います。安保調査会で、自民党の安保調査会で飛び交った従来の必要最小限では阻止力にはならない、国民を守れないとする意見や、迎撃範囲を相手国のミサイル基地に限定しないなどの意見も、専守防衛どころか国際法違反の先制攻撃能力保有にまでつながるものだと思います。敵基地攻撃能力では聞こえが悪いので、反撃能力と呼ぶなどということは、これは人々を愚弄するものだと思います。なんと呼称しようとも、この敵基地攻撃能力は戦争そのものだと思います。日本国憲法の第9条ではその第1項で、日本国民は正義と秩序を基調とする国際平和を誠実に希求し、国権の発動たる戦争と武力による威嚇または武力の行使は国際紛争を解決する手段としては永久にこれを放棄する。全項の目的を達するため、陸海空軍その他の戦力はこれを保持しない。国の公選権はこれを認めないと明確に書いています。敵基地攻撃能力はまさにこの憲法第9条が禁止する戦力であり、その保有は憲法違反に他なりません。この巨大な軍拡が2015年に強行された、この私たちの総がかり行動が生まれた集団的自衛権行使の一部容認に反対する運動が生まれたわけですけれども、その時に強行された安保法制に 踏み込んだものであることは、その下で進められていることは見逃せません。従来は相手国を攻撃する矛の役割、盾と矛の話がよく例えられるわけですけれども、矛の役割は、米軍が担い、防衛の盾の役割は自衛隊が担うというふうに政府は説明をしてきました。故に自衛隊は航空母艦、弾道ミサイル、戦略爆撃機などの戦略的兵器を保有してこなかったし、安保法制は従来の集団的自衛権に行使に関する憲法解釈を変えて、集団的自衛権の行使を拡大しましたから、武力攻撃自体を存立的事態などという名目で、日本への武力攻撃がなくても、米国が例えば中国との戦争を開始した場合、日本の自衛隊が米軍とともに相手国のミサイル基地、相手国のミサイル基地などを合わせて、指揮系統機能を攻撃することなど、全面戦争に入ることだと思います。こうした集団的こうした岸田内閣の下で、日本は急速に軍事力を強め、日米同盟を中心に従来、韓国やインド、オーストラリア、ニュージーランドなどとの軍事協力を推進し、さらに中国、朝鮮包囲網を形成に邁進しています。このことがアジア太平洋の軍事的緊張をいたずらに拡大することは間違いないと思います。この度のロシアによるウクライナ侵略から学ぶべきことは、戦争につながる軍事力の強化で国の安全を保障しようとするのではなくて、平時から友好と協力、共存の国際的関係を形成し、例えば非核兵器地帯条約締結など、全域の共同の安全保障体制を作り上げることの大切さだと思います。岸田政権はこの道を逆走しています。岸田政権の暴走を止めなくてはならないと思います。戦争を準備すれば戦争がやってくる。これは歴史の必然だと思います。戦争は他の手段をもってする政治の延長だ。クラウズビッツが言いましたけれども、それはまさに戦争は外交の失敗に他ならないということだと思います。戦争に至る前の平時において、相互の交流と粘り強い交渉によって、地域に仮想的国を作らない共存の東北アジア、東アジア、共存の東アジアなどの全域集団安保の構築こそ必要だと思います。この度のロシアによるウクライナの侵略から学ぶべきことは、戦争につながる軍事力の強化で国の安全を保障しようとするのではなく、この相互の平時から相互の友好と協力の関係を強めることだと思います。例えば平壌宣言と、例えば日中関係に4文書があるわけですけれども、日中4文書というのは、日中共同声明1972年、1976年の日中平和友好条約、それから1998年の平和と発展のための友好協力パートナーシップの協定に関する宣言などなど、 戦略的相互互恵のための、包括的推進に関する日中共同声明などなど、これらによって作られてきた中国と日本の平和友好の関係というのは、挑発者の石原慎太郎と知事らによって破壊されましたけれども、依然として日本と中国の関係をこの4文書の精神に戻すことが必要とされていると思います。日本国憲法全文は平和を愛する諸国民の公正と真偽に信頼して我らの安全と生存を保持しようと決意した。我らは平和を維持し、専制と隷従、圧迫と辺境を地上から永遠に除去しようと努めている国際社会において、名誉ある地位を占めたいと思う。我らは全世界の国民が等しく恐怖と欠乏から免れ、平和のうちに共存する権利を有することを確認する。我らはいずれの国家も自国のことのみに専念して他国を無視してはならないのであって、政治道徳の法則は普遍的なものであり、この法則に従うことは自国の主権を維持し、他国と対等関係に立とうとする各国の責務であると信ずるというふうに書いています。侵略されたらどうするかが肝心の問題ではありません。戦争になる前にどのような準備をするのかこそが肝心の問題だと思います。平時において近隣諸国との間にどのような平和と友好共存の関係を作り上げるかという大変難しい問題ではありますけれども、私は日本の憲法9条は現実的で可能な道だと思います。最後に私がいつも大好きな土人の言葉を取り上げておきます。希望とは地上の道のようなものである。もともと地上には道はない。歩く人が多くなればそれが道になるのだ。ありがとうございます。
Thank you, Mr. Tadaka-Ken, through your speech, we feel that how passionate you are for this time, endless your commitment and devotion. And especially somebody also mentioned it in our chatting room that preparing for the war will come. I mean, that just kind of punched my heart and my head, I think. Even though we say that we prevent the war, but yet actually we are maybe preparing for the war and the war will come. And we already see this in all over the world. Well, thank you again. Because we have a very, I didn't want to cut you off any of the speakers because we really want to hear all full stories. However, because of that, we are losing a lot of time for the Q&A. We will still give you some more time in the second session. But I will just give you maybe 10 minutes, just anybody who is really like to ask questions to any of these keynote speaker or to respondent. Please, you can do it. You can use emoji or you can raise your hand or you can, in Zoom, they say reaction with the hand. So please, you can turn on the mic and you can ask questions. So floor is all yours. So please take the full advantage of this 10 minutes.
Mimihan. This is Dr. No Johnson. I cannot hear you.
Yes, you can give up. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. It was wonderful presentations and comments that I enjoyed a lot. One question is that no one mentioned that how we are going to pressure USA in an effective way to stop the warmongering thing by the United States of America against North Korea. What I suggest is until USA denuclearize all the nuclear weapons and missiles, I think international community should be organized to sanction USA economically, socially, culturally, and ecologically. That probably could be one of the way that we be able to change the behavior of warmongering United States over against many nations and states, including North Korea. So we should apply economic sanctions against USA. That's what I want to say.
Okay, any other? I'm gonna just trying to get questions at the same time so that we will save some more time. I will try to probably can accept 2 more questions maybe or 1 more. Anyone?
2가지 질문을 좀 더 받을 수가 있을 것 같습니다.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't see everyone in the screen. So Kurt maybe can help me out for who is raising hands and like to ask some questions. Anyone? I remember there was
얘기할 수 있을까요?
네?
얘기할 수 있을까요?
네, 말씀하세요.
지금 가장 미국이 취해야 할 정책 2가지를 폐기하는 게 가장 중요합니다. 첫 번째는 대북 경제 제재 폐기, 이코노믹 생크션이죠. 2번째는 대북 적대시 정책 폐기죠. 이게 캐피탈리즘하고 소셜리즘의 대립이라고 해서 적대시하면 안 되거든요. 그러니까 요 2가지 정책이 먼저 폐기되고 없어져야지 피스 트리티가 연결됩니다. 다시 한번 얘기할게요. 대북 경제 제재, 이코노믹 생크션 폐기. 하나 더, 대북 적대시 정책 폐기. 아주 중요한 포인트입니다. 요게 안 될 경우에는 우리가 무력으로 갈 수 있는 상황까지 벌어집니다. 이상입니다.
Is this translation happening? Just to wonder, he was making a comment that there's 2 policy must changed, or should I say should be eliminated. Number 1 is the economic sanction against North Korea, and 1 was the policy regarding as hostility towards the North Korea or demonizing the North Korea. So he was making the comment that must be done to go forward with this peace process in Korean Peninsula. Anyone else? We will have more time after second session. Anybody who is urgent or has to leave a little bit early, they feel like they must make a comment or any questions now, please do, because if we don't, we want to be moving into the second session. Everybody okay? I don't want you to feel like I'm leaving anyone behind. Again, we will catch up some time so that we will have more time to discussion. Second session will be a lot of discussion time, so you can bring up any comments or questions there. Okay, then I will just wrap up the first session. I will then pass on to the second session, who will be facilitated by the Derek Dukan. So welcome, and thank you for being your attention.
Thank you very much, Mimi, and thank you to the presenters for the first session. It's very important that we have laid out before us the issues at stake, both historically but also prospectively, as we consider as people of faith the opportunities we have to work for peace. I especially found some heartening words from Jessica Lee when she commended the civil society actors to be bold in raising their voices and seeking opportunities to find creative ways to get out of the rut of the status quo that has held our political leaders hostage to military ways that have not led us successfully towards peace. We are very fortunate to have joined with us as participants people from various portions of our denominations. I count probably about at least 6 or 7 denominations from North America, and included among the denominations represented, there are staff or leaders from our ecumenical offices, from our advocacy offices, from peace fellowships, from our executive leaderships, and our regional partnership offices. So many of these gathered here are people who have committed to engage within their denominations and our ecumenical communities in efforts to work towards the Korea peace initiative to strengthen the political will to find a peace treaty and to make this the priority that it needs to be among our political leaders. One of the denominations that's done great work in that area already is the United Church of Canada, and Patty Talbot is going to initiate our conversation here with some thoughts about the engagement within her denomination and from her perspective ecumenically that we have set out before us. Patty?
Eric, wonderful. Thank you very much. And greetings to all who are gathered here this evening, this morning, for this event and this opportunity to be together. As a Canadian, it is a special privilege for me to participate, to learn from and engage with you. We are very grateful for that. I want to say that I'm joined by one of my colleagues, the Reverend Sandu Hyun, a United Church of Canada minister who also is part of this conference tonight. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully through that medium, give a brief reflection on the question, what can the ecumenical community do to engage with partners for peace in the Korean Peninsula? So let me share my screen if I can. Hopefully you can see that image. So what can the ecumenical community do to engage with partners for peace on the Korean Peninsula? I'd like to share briefly a few reflections from the experience of the United Church of Canada joining with partners in the Korea Peace Appeal, a campaign that we have called the 10,000 Signature Campaign. I would say that this campaign that we began is an example of the United Church trying to live out our commitment for solidarity, for engagement, for action with partners for peace on the Korean Peninsula. First, solidarity. Why did we begin a campaign to engage with the Korea Peace Appeal? A campaign of some 370 civil society and religious organizations in Korea to press for an end to the Korean War. The shift from an armistice to a peace treaty that would end the war. The first answer is very simple. We were invited by Korean partners to join them on this journey. The second is that the invitation builds on historic United Church commitments. The image that I'm sharing here is word art that's created by the motivations that were shared by United Church of Canada participants when we came together to think about what might a campaign look like? Why would we want to join with partners for peace in the Korean Peninsula? These are some of the motivations that were offered, and I offer them to you. The Korea Peace Appeal, the invitation to solidarity, was really an invitation for engagement. Korean partners invited, even challenged the people of the United Church to join with them and partners around the world to say, 70 years is enough. End the Korean War now. It built on United Church commitments. My apologies. I realize now there was no sound. I'm going to start that once again. If you'll just bear with me, my apologies.
It was Sunday on June 25th, 1950. When we were about ready to go into church, we heard the bomb explosion near, and our house was shaking. We prayed together for ending the dreadful war and bringing peace and joy of the Korean Peninsula into the world.
For the Korean people, World War II was never really resolved.
So the USSR came from the north and the USA came from the south, and Korea was divided.
The division and hostility between the North and South has been one of the profound root causes of all political, military, social, and economic problems of the Korean Peninsula of today.
It is time we put an end to this 70 years long war. Our hope is ongoing for reunification with peace.
한국에서 평화되어야 캐나다도 평화를 될 수가 있습니다. 거꾸로도 그래요.
One more time. Thank you for your patience, everyone. So engagement. Engagement led to the launch of a campaign in the United Church in mid-January, a campaign that was launched by the moderator and based on social media and engagement through various forms of social media. The campaign was also based on a commitment to action. Action that was local, regional, and national, involving individuals, congregations, communities of faith, regional judicatories, and also the church nationally. The action took a lot of forms and continues to take many forms. A lively social media campaign, and of course, a commitment to understand the call to end the Korean War and sign the petition. I'd briefly like to share 3 initial learnings and reflections from our campaign as we think about the question, what can the ecumenical community do in partnership towards peace on the Korean Peninsula? The first is about solidarity. Solidarity with partners for peace in the Korean Peninsula is a long-term and ongoing commitment. Our learning through this campaign is that opportunities for specific solidarity can deepen relationships and bring new energy into the vision for peace in Korea. Second, we're learning some things about engagement with partners for peace in the Korean Peninsula. The first is that effective engagement takes many forms. Education that the war is not over. Prayers for peace. The sharing and hearing of personal testimonies. A second and critical learning about engagement with partners for peace in the Korean Peninsula is that effective engagement in our church involves leadership from United Church people of Korean heritage. While the invitation from partners for engagement was to the United Church of Canada, without campaign leadership that includes United Church people of Korean heritage, our campaign would lack authenticity and would not embody mutuality with partners. A third learning from our campaign, and it's not over yet, is about action. Action for partners. Action with partners for peace in Korea. We're learning that action for peace will continue to be a long-term and ongoing commitment. We may not reach our goal of 10,000 signatures. And our sense is that Korean partners will understand what that might be about. We may need to learn to keep our eyes on the continued engagement, and that success is not about numbers, but about solidarity, engagement, and mutuality. I would simply end my brief time by asking each one of you, as you think about seeking peace with partners in the Korean Peninsula, what would solidarity, engagement, and action look like for you? And I'll stop there, Derek.
Thank you very much, Patty. I'd like to have as much time that people can ask questions or give thoughts. I just want to use one phrase offered by Reverend Lee Hong-jung early on to, I think, characterize the task before us. He used the phrase geology of mind. And I think about that a lot because, you know, part of the challenges, and we've heard many of them, is geopolitics, is how do we affect that? But we also have to reshape the geology or the geography, the topography of our own minds, the minds of our churches and of our communities, to think differently, to get out of the ruts that we're in that classify people as to enemies and our options as zero sum. Either we win and you lose, or you win and we lose. So I see those as challenges. The goals are as you've laid out, and we have a great opportunity over the next year to use the anniversary of the 70th years since the end of the Korean War, since the close of the Korean hostilities, to raise awareness. But how can we actively reshape the geography, the geology of our minds? So I'm going to look for, and I know it is a challenge, as people have pointed out, to hear and see questions and comments. But please make your voice heard if we miss your hand being virtually raised. I know many of our communities our denominational communities are somewhere along the path of engaging with the Korean Peace Appeal campaign formally. and seeking our own collection of signatures. And that is, I think, a good pathway to work within our denominations to raise awareness and to encourage solidarity and action. Ecumenically, I think that there's opportunity to work across denominations as well. I know we have structures to work ecumenically. Formally, of course, our national councils of churches provide that for our leadership and ecumenical offices, but also through the Ecumenical Forum on Korea, through various working groups, through the Asia Pacific Forum, there are ways to collaborate in our respective denominational efforts to increase the impact that we have.
Eric?
Yes.
This is Earl Arnold from the Presbyterian Peace Network for Korea. But could someone share a word or two about what the plan is to use the however many million signatures that are obtained between now and next year? Who's it going to be presented to, and what's the hope?
Thank you, Earl. I wonder if someone with the NCCK might be able to state the vision that you have for using, the worldwide collection of signatures. Kurt, do you know if somebody from the NCCK is in a position to address that?
에큐메니컬 신앙에서 이제 모아진 서명용지들이 모아지면 그걸 가지고 이제 유엔이나 또 이제 세계 각국 또 한반도를 중심으로 한 그동안 육자회담을 이끌었던 그런 정부들에게 한반도의 종전을 선언하고 평화 단계로 진전해 가기를 촉구하고 요구하는 일들을 할 것입니다. 그것은 남과 북뿐만 아니라 연관되어 있는 모든 나라들에게 이제 촉구해서 한반도의 평화를 영구적으로 정착해 가는데 도움이 될 수 있도록 노력을 하려고 생각하고 있습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. That is
Kim,
helpful.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Can I
And who is this? Yes.
Song
Go ahead.
Kim. Yes. 지금 우크라이나에 쳐들어간 러시아를 보거나 또 북한의 적대적인 이런 관계를 맺고 있는 미국을 보거나 그 제국들, 강대국들의 사람들의 피스 에듀케이션을 좀 더 강하게 해야 되겠다는 걸 느낍니다. 우리들의 피스 에듀케이션이 아니라 그렇게 남의 생명을 뺏어갈 수 있다는 거를 아는 국민들이 자기네 지도자들을 제어할 수 있는 그런 피스 에듀케이션을 해야 된다고 봅니다. 지금 또 뭐예요? 미국에서 한 번에 총을 가지고 18살이가 몇십 명, 50명, 21명 이렇게 총을 그들에게 쏠 수 쏴도 된다거나 이런 것을 에듀케이션을 통해서 제어하지 못하는 나라는 정말 uncivilized country에 지금은 그런 거를 알아야지 되는데 자기네들은 다 선진국이고 전쟁을 해서 이렇게 못 살게 된 나라들이 어렵다고 uncivilized라고 생각하는 이 마인드를 바꿔줘야지 되는데 그걸 누가 하겠어요? 기독교 리더들이 하고 공적 에듀케이션에서도 그런 피스 에듀케이션을 하도록 우리가 그 자국 내에서 이런 운동을 해야 되겠다고 생각합니다. 이런 피스, 한국의 피스 트리티를 위해서 해주시는 것도 참 고맙지만 미국, 캐나다, 러시아 이런 데서 사람의 생명을 중요시 여겨야 된다는 교육, 피스 에듀케이션을 좀 하는 데다가 운동을 일으켜줬으면 좋겠습니다. 일본의 아까 구조 이거나 마찬가지죠. 그렇게 사람 평화를 위해서 그 정권, 정부 이런 것들을 잘 조절할 수 있는 사람들을 교육하는 거 이런 것을 해주시기를 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, and I think that's a great point. We talk about the need to reprioritize Korea to increase the awareness of it, but we realize that one of the big challenges is, of course, the conflict in Ukraine is dominating the public airwaves and political sphere, but also that when we talk about the regional politics, the conflict in competition with China really sets the parameters for policy, that, at least from a U.S. perspective, in the region. And yet there may be opportunities in both of those if we look at situating the need for peace in Korea in the context of the broader need for peace and rebalancing militarization and strategy globally and there. So I think that the opportunity to work very closely with the peace fellowships and with all those who aren't just advocates in Korea, but advocates for peace and demilitarization globally, like our partners also with the Article 9 work, is very key. I know, Michael Nurath, you had your hand up earlier too. Is there a question that you still have to put before us? And we have about 3 minutes, so this may be the last question or comment, and then we'll, I think, probably need to start closing.
Thanks, Derek. I don't need to have the last question because you somewhat answered it. I was going to ask, in the midst of so many crises happening around the world and here in the US right now, as you mentioned, the focus on gun violence and Ukraine and how do we cut through the din of so many crises to raise this important issue. And I think you touched on it right there. What else we can connect it to. I also think certainly kind of the nuclear crisis is one that is important to continue to lift up, as well as I think September is often a time when many of our traditions have different peace-related remembrances in association with the International Day of Peace on September 21st. But I was going to ask Patty, if there are any other best practices of how you particularly directed attention to this campaign in the midst of so many other challenging events happening in the world.
May I answer that, Derek, briefly?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Very briefly, Michael, everything in this campaign depends on what we're calling champions. This isn't a campaign that's being led by the national office. There are champions that include people like our moderator, but include all kinds of others, individuals, ministry personnel, ecumenical leaders, and they're championing the importance of peace, that peace anywhere is important for peace everywhere. And I think they're trying to make the connections as well. It's not just about Korea, but it's about peace and how we can act and be together, especially when partners seek that solidarity. So champions and people that speak directly to the interconnectedness, maybe, of peace anywhere is important for peace everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that last phrase, peace anywhere is important for peace everywhere. Rather than seeing these many, valid and critical concerns as competitions for our attention and vital resources, to see them as opportunities to draw the connections and to work together across the denominations and ecumenical aisles. And I know that our ecumenical leaders in the national councils of churches are very good at doing that, at addressing a variety of concerns before people of faith. I just want to thank again all the presenters who've been with us, laying the important issues for our consideration. I want to thank Bishop Vashti McKenzie for joining us and for renewing this in the attention of the National Council of Churches USA. I appreciate all the representatives from the denominations that give this such an important place in your advocacy and solidarity work, for being present for this important conference. And I'd like to thank the National Council of Churches in Korea, in particular, Reverend Lee Jung-hoo, for being deliberate and intentional in convening the international community to this forum, and for the Korea Peace Appeal, and the ways that we can work together. I'd like to turn for a closing prayer to Reverend Chung Byung-hoo Brungju for offering us a closing prayer. And once again, thank everybody for engaging with us. And I wish everybody a good day and good evening as we prepare for the closing prayer. Kurt, is someone going to be have a microphone there for?
정병주
예,
목사님.
제가 마무리 기도. 이거 예레미야 선지자의 울부짖음을 듣습니다. 슬프고 아프다. 내 마음속이 아프고 내 마음이 답답하여 잠잠할 수 없으니 이는 나의 심령이 나팔 소리와 전쟁의 경보를 들음이로다. 하나님, 우리 한반도의 종전을, 진정한 평화를 위해서 가까운 우리 일본, 그리고 미국, 캐나다, 하나님의 사람들이 아버지는 오랜 시간 서로의 평화에 관한 이야기를 나누면서 한반도의 진정한 평화를 위해서 함께 이야기했습니다. 존귀하신 하나님 아버지, 너무나도 열정적으로 캐나다에 우리 귀한 교회가 나서서 캠페인을 벌이고 미국, 일본 함께 해주심을 감사합니다. 일본과 한국은 이제 아침이 기울어져 가고 미국과 캐나다 깊어가는 밤입니다. 이와 같이 귀한 시간에 하나님, 이 땅의 평화를 위해서 한반도뿐만 아니라 우크라이나, 미얀마, 그리고 팔레스타인, 수많은 분쟁국가 하나님 긍휼히 여겨 주셔서 무기들을 아버지 하나님 농기구로 만들어 주시고 전쟁이 그치고 진정한 평화가 함께하여 주셔서 온 나라 백성들이 서로 손잡고 즐거워할 수 있게 하옵소서. 하나님이 오늘 우리의 시간을 보셨을 줄 믿습니다. 감사드리옵고 평화를 위해서 일하는 하나님의 종들을 위해 하나님이 축복하여 주시옵소서. 예수님 이름으로 기도합니다. 아멘. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, I want to offer a word of appreciation to Reverend Songkuk Park with the Presbyterian Church of the Republic of Korea for his translation, and for Reverend David McIntosh with the Center for Minorities and Mission in Japan for his translation. Very critical for an event like this to have the translation work very well. So once again, thank all of you. I know it's late here in the States. So good night to everyone here, and I pray everyone have a good day there in Korea, Japan, and elsewhere. Thank you.
Be safe and thank you, everyone.
Blessings to all.
Thank you.
Duncan, you've done a wonderful presiding.
박사님 감사합니다.
Bye-bye. Wonderful to be together.
수고하셨습니다.
감사합니다.
Goodbye. Enjoyed all the presenters and the responders. Thank you so much for the great work
Thank
you've
you.
done. You ought to be
Thank you
encouraged.
for your wonderful work. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you so soon.
I hope
Yes.
so.
Okay, of course.